The sun had just started to sink behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the lake where our so-called family vacation was taking place. It should have been peaceful, even idyllic, the kind of evening where kids chase fireflies and adults share soft laughter over grilled corn and too sweet wine. But in our family, nothing was ever that simple. My name is Ella. I'm 42 years old, and I've been married to Daniel for 12 years. We have a son, Noah, or rather, I raised him. I love him like my own. But I didn't give birth to him, and that's something Margaret, my mother-in-law, never let me forget. I was standing at the outdoor grill brushing olive oil over skewers when I heard the words that would change everything. "She's not your real mother." The sentence came like a gunshot. I turned slowly, my hand still holding the brush as the laughter died out around the campfire. Margaret stood near the edge of the patio. Her arms crossed, her voice sharp and crystal clear. She wasn't whispering. She wanted everyone to hear. Noah, our 10-year-old, stood frozen in front of her, holding a pine cone in one hand like a peace offering. His eyes widened, hurt, and confusion flooding his face. "What do you mean, Grandma?" he asked softly. "She didn't give birth to you, sweetheart," Margaret said in the same tone she used when explaining table manners. "Your real mommy is someone else. Ella just married your dad. It's important you know the truth." I saw my husband Daniel flinch, but say nothing. That had become his default in recent years, silence. And in that silence, Margaret had grown louder, bolder, and more cruel. I walked over slowly, calmly, and placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. "We'll talk about this later, baby," I said quietly. "Go wash up before dinner." He hesitated, still looking between us before nodding and slipping inside the cabin. The rest of the family sat in stunned silence. No one met my eyes. Margaret smirked, believing again that she'd won, that her truth had shattered something, but she didn't know. She didn't know that I had been preparing for this moment for 6 years. She didn't know about the documents waiting in my suitcase, or the dinner planned for tomorrow evening. She didn't know that her charity case daughter-in-law was worth over $50 million, thanks to a hidden inheritance and years of smart, quiet investing. And tomorrow night she was going to learn. Because tomorrow I was done pretending to be small. I wasn't born into wealth. My life started in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery in Kansas City, raised by a single father who worked double shifts at a steel plant. I learned early how to stretch a dollar fix what was broken and smile even when I wanted to cry. When I met Daniel in my late 20s, I wasn't looking for love. I was working in accounting, saving every spare cent, investing quietly and conservatively index funds real estate in undervalued neighborhoods and long-term dividend stocks. I wasn't flashy, but I was careful. By the time I was 35, I had turned a modest inheritance from my father into a quiet fortune. I never told anyone. Not because I was secretive, but because I had learned that money changed how people looked at you. And I wanted to be seen for who I was, not what I had. Daniel came with Noah, a widower with a 3-year-old boy and a heart still mired in grief. I didn't fall in love with Daniel quickly, but I fell in love with Noah almost instantly. He was curious, kind, and desperate for warmth. I gave him everything I had. And Margaret, she hated me from the moment we met. She'd always seen herself as the family's matriarch. Every decision flowed through her, every holiday, every opinion, every legacy. She believed I was lucky to marry her son, and even luckier to get to play mother to Noah. To her, I was a placeholder, a caretaker, an outsider. In those early years, I tried to win her over. I hosted dinners, sent her birthday cards, offered to help with her errands. She responded with politeness dipped in poison. "Oh, you cooked this yourself? How brave. This dress? Oh, it's nice. For someone on a budget. Some women are just meant to support others. That's still valuable in its own way." And Daniel, he said little. Claimed he didn't want to cause waves, that it was better to keep the peace, that Margaret would soften with time. But she didn't soften. She sharpened. She criticized everything from how I packed Noah's lunch to the way I decorated our home. At family gatherings, she would introduce me as Daniel's wife, never Noah's mom. When I politely corrected her, she'd raise her eyebrows and say, "Well, you know what I mean." What cut deepest wasn't just the way she treated me, it was how others followed her lead. Daniel's siblings mirrored her dismissive tone. Even Daniel slowly but surely began to act as if I was simply lucky to be part of the family. I watched them quietly cataloging every slight, every insult. Every time I was seated at the other table during holidays or handed a dishcloth while the others laughed over dessert. Every time I was asked to watch the kids while the real family went out for wine tastings or spa trips. The worst was when Noah started asking questions. Nana said I look like my real mommy. What did she mean Nana told me you didn't really want to come to my school play? Nana said you're just helping Dad until he finds someone more like Mommy. I reassured him the best I could, reminded him that I loved him, that families are built on love, not blood. But I knew what Margaret was doing. She wasn't just trying to erase me, she was trying to rewrite the story of our family. And Daniel, whether through weakness or weariness, let her. So I made a decision. If they saw me as powerless, then I would stay silent. If they believed I was nothing, then I'd let them. I leaned into it. I declined invitations to expensive dinners, citing budget worries. I wore the same 2 coats every winter. I drove the same 10-year-old car, even though I could have bought a fleet. I let them believe I was small. Because when people think you're small, they speak freely. They show you who they really are. And now, 6 years later, I had seen everything I needed to see. Tomorrow they would finally see me, not the version they created in their minds, but the woman behind the quiet smile. The woman who held the entire table's future in her hands. The family trip was Margaret's idea, of course. She called Daniel 3 months ago, insisting that we all needed a proper getaway to reconnect. Her voice was syrupy sweet over speakerphone, but I knew what it really was, a performance likely for show in front of her friends. She needed pictures, proof of the perfect family. And I was still just a supporting character. We'll rent a lake house, she said, big enough for everyone. You, Noah, me, Janice, and her girls, maybe even Peter if he's not too busy. It'll be nice to have Ella come too. The way she said my name like it was an afterthought. Daniel smiled, oblivious. Sounds great, Mom. We could use a little time away. I nodded, said nothing. Inside, I began to prepare. I'd already been working with my attorney, Andrew Lang, for over a year. The estate restructuring was nearly done. The family trust was finalized. The new will had been notarized. My assets were divided into 3 large branches: real estate investments and legacy giving. And most importantly, the primary heir had been designated Noah. No one knew. Not even Daniel. Especially not Margaret. I booked the upgraded van for the drive, but told Daniel we got a discount through my office. I paid for the house rental up front through an LLC they'd never heard of. Daniel thought Margaret had paid. Margaret thought Daniel had paid. Neither of them had any idea it had come from me. Let them believe whatever made them feel important. When we arrived, the tension began almost immediately. Margaret arrived first, already occupying the master suite and setting up her vanity. There's only one bathroom upstairs, so you and Ella can take the smaller room on the lower level, she said to Daniel. Mom, it's fine. We don't need much. I glanced at Noah, who was running through the cabin excitedly, unaware that the upstairs rooms had been divvied up before we'd arrived. I'll take the pull-out sofa, I offered, though I didn't need to. Let the kids have their space. Margaret nodded with faux gratitude. Thank you, dear. So thoughtful, as always. Over the next 2 days, it played out like it always did. Margaret treated me like I was invisible. I washed dishes while she sipped wine. I prepared breakfast while she critiqued my cooking. Scrambled eggs again. Noah used to love waffles when his mother made them. At meals, I was asked to take the pictures instead of being in them. I was given paper napkins, while the others used cloth. It was subtle but deliberate, a campaign of constant diminishment. Daniel noticed sometimes, but he never said much. Maybe he thought I was used to it. Maybe he just didn't want the fight. It was during the second night that things shifted. We'd just finished a long hike to the lake. I'd brought snacks, packed extra socks for the kids, and kept a quiet pace to let Margaret take the lead. As always, I stayed in the background. That evening, as the kids played cards and the adults sipped cheap wine by the fire, Margaret's voice cut across the room like a whip. She's not your real mother, you know, she said to Noah loud enough for everyone to hear. Noah blinked, confused. What? Margaret leaned back with a theatrical sigh. I just think it's wrong not to be honest. You should know that your real mother, bless her soul, wasn't Ella. Ella's a helper. A stand-in. No one spoke. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. And I smiled. Because that was the final piece. That sentence, those words spoken freely with no shame, were what I'd been waiting for. The culmination of 6 years of disrespect, erasure, and casual cruelty. The perfect evidence. It wasn't just rudeness, it was erasure. And it was time to show them who I really was. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was angry, no, that part had long burned itself out. I didn't have the luxury of rage anymore, only clarity. Margaret's words had been cruel, yes, but what hit harder was Daniel's silence. He had sat there like a man watching a movie he wasn't part of, not defending me, not correcting her, just letting it pass, letting it all pass. And it wasn't the first time. I lay on the scratchy pull-out sofa downstairs, listening to the creaks of the cabin above me. Footsteps, flushing toilets, low murmurs. It was like the house itself had a rhythm, a heartbeat, and I was beneath it, always beneath it. I stared at the ceiling and thought back to the last time I'd felt truly included. It wasn't when Daniel proposed. Margaret had called me a lovely distraction the night he gave me the ring. It wasn't when Noah made me a handmade card for Mother's Day 3 years ago. Margaret took it from my hands and said, "This should really go on his real mother's grave." And it certainly wasn't when Daniel's sister Janice told me over Christmas, "You know, my mom's just old-fashioned. She doesn't mean anything by it." But it meant something to me. It always did. I had spent 12 years caring for that boy. I'd held him through stomach bugs, taught him to read, showed up to every school meeting and soccer game. I made the lunches, paid the tuition for his private school when Daniel was laid off for 6 months, and I never once made a fuss. Because I wasn't here for credit. I was here for love. And now I was being erased from my own story. The next morning, I took a long walk alone around the lake trail. No one noticed I was gone. It gave me time to think about Daniel, about what I had tolerated, and about the moment that had finally broken something I didn't even know was still fragile. Because it wasn't just about me. It was about Noah. I realized that if I let this continue, he would grow up thinking it was okay to treat people this way, to stand by while others were diminished, to watch as those who love you are quietly excluded and say nothing. I refused to let that be his model. When I returned to the cabin, everyone was already out on the back patio. Margaret was pouring mimosas. Daniel was manning the grill. Noah was sitting by himself staring into his cereal bowl. I walked over and sat next to him. "Hey," I said gently, "you okay?" He nodded. Then after a moment, Grandma says, "You're not my real mom." I took a breath. "That's true. I didn't give birth to you." He looked up at me, eyes searching. "Does that mean you don't love me like a real mom?" I smiled then. Not a bitter smile. A full one. "No, sweetheart. I love you more than some moms ever know how to love. Loving someone doesn't come from your stomach. It comes from your heart. And I've loved you from the moment I met you." He looked down again. I told her she was wrong. I said, "You're my realest mom." I didn't cry, but I came close. That was the moment I knew I hadn't failed him. Not yet. But I also knew this couldn't go on. Later that evening, I texted my attorney. "Proceed. Dinner tomorrow. Prepare full documents." He replied in under a minute. "All ready, waiting on your signal." I closed my phone, stood up, and walked to the patio where Margaret was laughing at one of her own jokes. "Tomorrow night," I said, smiling. "Let's do a real dinner. I'd like to cook something special. For the whole family." She arched an eyebrow. "Really? You cook?" I nodded. "I do. And what I'm cooking tomorrow, I thought, is going to be unforgettable." The next morning arrived crisp and bright, as if the mountain air had no idea the emotional avalanche that was coming. I woke up early, earlier than anyone else in the cabin. Noah was still curled up under his Star Wars blanket, his little feet sticking out. I tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and padded quietly into the kitchen. I pulled out my planner and opened the small inner pocket, where I had hidden the trust draft, the property documents, and the latest balance sheet from my private investment firm. 51 million. Quiet liquid and fully under my control. It had taken over a decade of calculated steps. The inheritance I had received from my late aunt was just the beginning. I had turned that seed money into a forest investments in small biotech firms, commercial real estate, in up-and-coming cities, even a chain of boutique bookstores that now catered to a niche crowd of nostalgic retirees. But I never flashed the wealth. I dressed modestly. I drove a 10-year-old hybrid. I let Margaret believe I was dependent on Daniel, even though our entire mortgage had been paid off by me anonymously 3 years ago, through a trust that had my maiden name on it. For 12 years, I had played the role of the grateful second wife, the outsider trying to belong. And today, I was done with that. I spent the morning cleaning the small kitchen and heading to the upscale grocer in the nearby town. They carried imported cheeses, organic lamb, and small batch wines you couldn't find outside Napa. As I browsed the aisles, I felt something strange inside me, lightness. I wasn't afraid anymore. The fear of not being accepted, of being seen as less than of not being enough, it had evaporated. I had proof. I had receipts. But more than that, I had clarity. I was never the problem. By noon, I was back at the cabin unpacking ingredients and chopping herbs on the counter. Daniel walked in from the deck, eyebrows raised. "You okay? You've been busy this morning." "I'm great," I said, brushing rosemary off my apron. "Just thought we could have a proper meal tonight. I've got lamb roasted root vegetables, and I'm making that cranberry brie tart Janice loved last Thanksgiving." Daniel blinked. "Where'd you get all that local market?" I said easily. "Thought we deserved something special." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded and stepped outside again. As usual, he didn't press. Margaret walked in 20 minutes later, her nose wrinkled slightly when she saw the grocery bags. "You didn't have to do all this. We were going to order pizza." "Oh, I know," I said calmly, "but it's our last night here. I thought it'd be nice to close it properly." She narrowed her eyes. She sensed something. The dynamic had shifted even if she couldn't pinpoint how yet. Noah wandered into the kitchen and offered to help. I let him whisk the vinaigrette and spoon goat cheese into the tart shells. We talked about trees, about how he wanted to build a fort behind our house when we got home, and whether he could use cardboard or wood. "I'll buy you the wood," I said, smiling. "Really?" "You bet. You're going to build something strong, something that lasts." Dinner was set for 6:30. I changed into a soft navy dress and pulled my hair back. Not overdressed, not flashy, just enough to be remembered. I took the tablet from my suitcase and placed it on the bookshelf behind the dining table screen, turned off, waiting for the perfect moment. By 6:25, the table was laid, candles lit, wine, opened lamb resting. Margaret walked in wearing pearls and perfume like she was attending a country club brunch. Daniel followed already with a drink in hand. Noah skipped in excited. Janice and her husband arrived just in time carrying a half-hearted bottle of red and a pie they bought from a gas station. Margaret clapped her hands. "This looks lovely, dear. Much better than I expected." I smiled. "Thank you, Margaret. I thought we'd enjoy something real tonight, something honest." They didn't catch the double meaning. We sat, we poured, we toasted. And as the meal began, so did the last quiet moment this family would ever share under the illusion I was the weak one. Because soon that illusion would be shattered completely. The wine glasses clinked lightly, echoing against the pine-paneled walls of the cabin. The early evening sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm golden glow on the rustic table. I took my seat quietly at the far end opposite Margaret. Janice Daniels' daughter from his first marriage was seated beside her husband Chuck, who hadn't said more than 3 words since they arrived. Margaret sat in her usual place diagonally across from me with Daniel to her right, and Noah at my side. The food had come out perfectly. The lamb was tender, the roasted vegetables caramelized just enough, and the cranberry brie tart made Margaret blink in visible surprise when she took a bite. "Well, I suppose we won't be needing pizza after all," she said with a tight smile. I smiled politely. I thought I'd splurge. It's not every day we're all under one roof. Janice was the first to speak earnestly. "This is amazing, Sarah. Where'd you learn to cook like this? Practice," I said. "Lots of quiet dinners with just me and Noah." Daniel nodded distractedly, already half lost in his second glass of wine. Margaret sipped her own more slowly, her gaze darting to the wine bottle label. She'd noticed the price, no doubt. "This wine is different," she said. "Where'd you find it?" A little place in town, I said. They import from Oregon. Pinot Noir 2016 vintage. Margaret gave a small huff of amusement. Didn't peg you for a wine connoisseur. I contain multitudes, I replied lightly. Noah giggled. For a few minutes, the table was filled only with the soft sounds of forks, scraping plates, glasses clinking, and small talk. Then, as the main course was nearly finished, I placed my fork down carefully and stood. Before we moved to dessert, I said, keeping my voice calm and deliberate, I'd like to say something. Everyone turned toward me. Janice looked curious. Chuck looked mildly alarmed. Daniel glanced up from his plate confused. Margaret froze. She knew. Somehow she knew. I want to thank everyone for joining this trip, I began, especially since it's rare these days for families to gather without distractions. Janice nodded politely. Margaret stayed silent. But more than that, I continued. I want to thank you for giving me the chance to observe, to learn, to listen. Daniel squinted. What? Do you mean? I turned slightly and reached for the tablet I'd placed on the shelf earlier. I tapped the screen, then turned it toward the table. On it, a clean portfolio dashboard showing my full net worth in 6 bold digits. $51,298, 432. Silence. Total absolute silence. Then Janice let out a quiet, "Wait, what is that?" "It's my financial summary," I said simply. "Private holdings, investments, properties." Chuck leaned forward. "Is this real?" "It is." Daniel was staring stunned. Margaret paled. "This has to be a joke," she whispered. "It's not," I said, gently. "I started building it long before I met Daniel. And when I married into this family, I chose deliberately to keep it quiet, to see what mattered most." I turned to Margaret, now clutching her wine glass with white knuckles. "And now I know." Daniel finally spoke. You've had this all this time." "Yes. And the house, the mortgage, the tuition funds for Noah. All taken care of," I said. "In my name, through Shell Trusts. I wanted to contribute quietly without disrupting the family dynamic." Margaret stood suddenly, her chair scraping back violently. "You let me believe you were broke, that you were lucky we let you in." I tilted my head. "You let yourself believe that." Janice looked from me to her father. "You're telling us Mom's been sitting on $50 million? I corrected her gently. "Stepmom." "And yes," Margaret's voice rose. "Why would you do this? What kind of person hides money from their own family?" "The kind who's been treated like a burden for over a decade," I said. My voice never wavered. "The kind who wanted to see whether she was accepted as a person, not a bank account. And the kind who's had enough." Noah looked up at me confused. "Mom," I smiled at him. "Everything's okay, baby." "Does this mean we can build that treehouse?" I laughed softly. "We can build a mansion in the trees if you want." Janice, still trying to process, turned to Daniel. "Did you know about this?" Daniel shook his head, shell-shocked. Not a clue. Margaret's fury twisted into something more panicked. "But you can't just spring this on us. This affects everything." "Does it?" I asked. I thought I didn't matter, that I was just the second wife, not real family. Or did that only apply when you thought I had nothing to offer? Margaret's face twisted. "You've been lying, manipulating." "No," I said calmly. "I've been watching, listening, and deciding." I pulled another document from the folder beside me and laid it on the table. "This is my updated will, as of this morning." Daniel swallowed hard. "Most of the estate will be put into trust for Noah. He'll inherit it in stages 25, 30, and 35 under the guidance of a fiduciary team. Not family. Not you," I added, turning to Margaret. She choked slightly, backing into her chair. "But that's not all," I continued. "Access to the trust is conditional. If I detect any interference with my relationship with Noah, if I see the same subtle attempts to cut me out as have been made in the past, everything reverts to charitable organizations for underprivileged children." Janice gasped. Margaret's lips parted in horror. You can't be serious." I met her eyes, unwavering. "I've never been more serious in my life." The room remained frozen. Chuck whispered, "Damn." Then Noah, innocent sweet Noah, raised his glass of grape juice and said, "To the best dinner ever." The entire table stared at him, and I smiled, because he was right. It was the best dinner ever. It was the end of pretending, and the beginning of everything I had built, finally on my terms. Margaret collapsed into her chair like a deflated balloon, her wineglass slipping from her fingers and landing softly on the table. The silence in the room was heavy, punctuated only by Noah munching quietly on a piece of roasted carrot, blissfully unaware of the emotional detonation that had just taken place. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands on his temples. "Sarah," he finally said, voice shaking, "you've had this money all this time, and you never told me." I kept my voice steady. I didn't lie. I simply didn't share everything. And with good reason. Janice sat frozen, one hand still hovering over her now cold plate. Chuck looked between the adults like a man witnessing an unfolding courtroom drama he didn't sign up for. "You let us all believe you were struggling," Janice said, her tone somewhere between awe and anger. "I let you treat me the way you thought I deserved to be treated when I had nothing to offer you," I replied. "That distinction matters." Margaret was the first to explode. "How dare you!" she shouted, rising again, her chair toppling behind her. "You sat in this house, ate at this table while I cooked for you, helped you let you into our family, and this entire time you were what's spying on us, running some twisted experiment. Helped me." I raised my eyebrows. "Margaret, you told my son I wasn't his real mother on a trip I paid for." Daniel's head snapped toward his mother. "You what?" Margaret's eyes widened slightly, but her chin jutted out. It was a moment of frustration. "No, it was a moment of truth," I said sharply. One that confirmed everything I'd suspected for years. Daniel stood pacing now, his hands clenched at his sides. "I can't believe this. I can't believe any of this." "You didn't want to believe it," I said gentler now. "I saw who you became when you thought I had nothing. And it broke my heart." Janice turned to Margaret. "Mom, you really said that to Noah?" Margaret's defensive wall crumbled slightly. "He was getting too attached. I thought he should know." "Know what?" I interrupted. "That the woman who raises him, tucks him in, teaches him, fights for him every day isn't his real mother, because his biological mother left him without a word." Janice flinched. "I never tried to replace anyone," I continued, "but I've been here every day, and I've loved that boy as fiercely as anyone ever could." Daniel looked at me, now really looked at me for the first time all night. There was pain in his eyes, and maybe regret. "You never gave me a reason to doubt you," he said softly. "I just let them do it." "You didn't speak up when it mattered," I said, no judgment in my tone. "Just truth. And now you want to punish us," Margaret snapped. "No," I said calmly. "I want to protect myself and protect Noah, that's all." Janice spoke quietly. "You said the trust would go to charity if your relationship with Noah is threatened." "That's right," I said. "I've already filed the paperwork. The trust is legally independent of this family." Chuck finally broke his silence. "Well, I don't know what to say except, damn, Sarah. I mean, respect." Janice shot him a glare, but I almost laughed. Margaret clutched the edge of the table. "So what we're just cut out now, is that it?" "Not cut out," I replied. "But now everything's on my terms." I picked up a second folder, sliding it toward Daniel. "That's the documentation for the family cabin in Vermont," I said. "It's in Noah's name. He'll own it outright when he turns 21. Until then, it's held in trust. If anything happens to me, it's secured." He looked at the folder without touching it. "You planned this for years?" "Yes," I answered. "And you still had the chance to pass the test. But you didn't." Janice looked down. "You're right," she said softly. "I judged you. I assumed things. I let Mom's attitude guide my own. And I never really took the time to ask who you were beyond being Dad's wife." Her voice cracked. "But you're not just that. You're a whole force of nature." Tears pricked my eyes, but I held them back. "Thank you for saying that." Margaret looked like she might faint again. You've humiliated us, embarrassed this family. No, I said. I gave you an opportunity to rise. You chose to sink. Daniel finally sat down, shoulders sagging. What happens now? That's up to all of you, I said. The money's protected. Noah is protected. But as far as this family goes, relationships, holidays, shared memories, you'll have to earn those back. Slowly. Genuinely. If you want them. I stood again. Trust is earned, and I'm done giving it away freely. The room remained heavy with silence. Only Noah spoke. Mom, he said, tugging at my sleeve. Can I have some of that chocolate tart now? I smiled down at him. Of course, baby. Because the fallout might still be raining down around us, but for me, the storm had already passed. And in its place, I was building something better. On my terms. The next morning, the air in the cabin was different. Quieter. Heavier. Daniel and I didn't speak much over breakfast. He kept casting glances toward me like he wanted to say something but didn't know where to begin. Margaret didn't come out of her room. Janice looked like she hadn't slept. Only Noah once again was full of light. He sat next to me, happily eating cereal, humming a song from the cartoon we'd watched the night before. I brushed my fingers through his hair, feeling his warmth, his steadiness. I had fought for this, for him, for our bond. I wasn't going to let it slip again. Daniel cleared his throat. Can we talk? I nodded and followed him out to the small porch where the fog was still lifting from the lake. I want to say I'm sorry, he said, his voice gravelly. But I know that's not enough. I waited. I let them treat you like an outsider, he continued. I should have said something the first time I saw it. The way Mom would look down on you or Janice would talk around you. I thought, if I just kept the peace, it would pass. He looked out at the water, eyes glossy. But I wasn't keeping peace. I was avoiding responsibility. And I hurt you because of it. I took a deep breath. Yes, you did. He looked down ashamed. But I added, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be real. Daniel turned to me. Then help me be better. Help me undo this. I shook my head gently. You can't undo it. You can only move forward. But that starts with boundaries. He nodded slowly. What do you need from me? I met his eyes. I need you to stop letting other people speak for me. I need you to make space for me at the table, literally and emotionally. And most of all, I need you to protect my relationship with Noah, even when it's inconvenient. I will, he said immediately. I promise. I paused, then nodded. Okay, let's see if your actions match your words. We sat in silence for a few moments before I spoke again. And Margaret Daniel sighed. I don't know. She's not going to change overnight. She doesn't need to, I replied. She needs to either respect the rules or stop expecting access. She won't take that well. She already didn't, I said, shrugging. But that's not my problem anymore. Inside, Janice was quietly folding laundry when I came back in. She looked up, then quickly stood. Hey, can we talk? I nodded and followed her to the back deck. I thought about what you said last night. She began wringing her hands. About how I never really saw you. She glanced at me, her expression open for once. You're right. I didn't. I bought into the idea that you were just someone Dad married some background character. But you're not. Her voice trembled. You're the woman who raised my brother's child when his birth mother walked out. You held that little boy together. You've held all of us together more than once, even when we didn't see it. I said nothing, just listened. I can't undo the past, she continued, but I want to earn a better place in your life. If you'll let me. I gave her a long look. Start with Noah. Treat him like the grandson he is. Don't repeat Margaret's mistake. And don't correct him if he calls me Mom in public. She nodded. Absolutely. And stop assuming I'm fragile or desperate for inclusion, I added. If I'm in the room, it's because I want to be, not because I need your charity. I understand. We shared a long silence before she said quietly, You still love Dad, don't you? I looked away for a moment, then back at her. I did. Very much. But that part of the story ended. And I've learned to write my own chapter since then. She nodded, eyes damp. Well, if you ever want to share those chapters with me, I'd like to read them. I smiled faintly. We'll see. That night, Noah and I curled up on the couch and watched the stars through the window. His head rested on my shoulder, his small hand wrapped around my thumb. Mom, he whispered. Yes, baby. Are we going to come back here with everyone next year? I thought for a moment. Maybe, but only if it's safe, only if we're respected. Okay, he said simply, as long as I get to be with you. I kissed the top of his head. You always will be. In the weeks that followed, Daniel started calling more. He'd show up with Noah for weekend visits, sometimes alone, sometimes with Janice. Margaret stayed distant but not defiant. The dynamic had shifted. I had drawn a line, and they had finally noticed. I didn't need them to love me, but I demanded they respect me, and for the first time in years, it felt like maybe, just maybe, that respect was real. 3 years later, I was sitting on the sun porch of my new home watching Noah chase our dog through the backyard, his laughter echoing like music through the spring air. The move had been the final step in reclaiming my peace. I sold the modest home I'd pretended to rent and bought a place of my choosing on my own terms. A home with wide windows, a vegetable garden, and a spare room that Noah had already claimed as his weekend sanctuary. Daniel and I now shared something we hadn't had in years, a steady, respectful rhythm. He visited often, sometimes with Noah, sometimes just to talk. We still had our wounds, but there was no pretending anymore. And the truth, though sharp at first, had softened into something stable. Janice and I had become something close to friends. She'd never admit it, but I could see her effort. She invited me to lunch, sent pictures of her kids, and even asked for recipes. Something I'd never imagined 3 years ago when she couldn't remember if I liked red or white wine. As for Margaret, she kept her distance. After that infamous dinner, she had a choice: change or accept the consequences. She chose silence. And I chose peace. I hadn't seen her in almost 2 years. Occasionally, I received stiff birthday cards for Noah signed with just her name. No notes, no warmth, just the bare minimum. I never withheld them. But Noah rarely showed interest. His world had shaped around the people who chose to be present, not those who demanded a title without earning the relationship. That was the hardest part for Margaret. I think learning that Grandma was not a guaranteed role. It was a privilege, one she had treated like a performance and ultimately lost the audience. I thought about that moment often, the night she shouted, "She's not your real mother." It had hurt. But now in hindsight, it was the moment I stopped hiding, and it changed everything. Noah still remembered it, not in the way that haunted him, but in the way kids remember the first time they realize adults can be wrong. One day, we were walking past a family at the park. A boy called another woman mom, and someone nearby whispered, "That's his stepmom." Noah didn't miss a beat. He turned to me and said, "That's what they call you too, huh?" I smiled. "Yes, sometimes. But you're just my mom, right?" Right. That night, I wrote a letter to myself, my past self, the woman who sat quietly on that couch while her in-laws spoke over her, the woman who swallowed her pride to protect a child who kept receipts, not out of bitterness, but clarity. I wrote, "You are not invisible, you are not secondary, you are not powerless, and one day they'll see." But the truth, I no longer needed them to. My worth didn't hinge on their recognition. I had Noah's love, my own peace, and a future I built with my own hands. The money remained untouched by their hands, and the trust was working exactly as designed. Noah's education was funded. His health was covered. His future secure. And not once did I regret putting up those boundaries. Because love without respect isn't love, it's manipulation. And I had lived that lesson enough for a lifetime. Now when people ask about my past, I don't tell them I survived a family who underestimated me. I tell them I outgrew a family who didn't know how to see a woman like me. Strong, resourceful, protective, real. And when Noah runs into my arms after school telling me all about his science projects and his dreams of becoming an architect, I don't think about what I lost. I think about what I saved, his trust, my dignity, our future. As I sit here now, A few years removed from that family trip that changed everything, I can finally say this. With peace in my heart, I'm no longer angry. Not at Margaret, not at Daniel, not even at myself. For so long, I thought being quiet was the right thing to keep the peace to stay small so others could feel big. I told myself that if I waited long enough, they'd see my worth, that if I just gave more loved harder, tried a little longer, they'd come around. But the truth, I finally learned the truth. I want every woman to hear, especially those in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond, is this. You don't need anyone else's permission to take up space in your own life. You don't owe people grace when they offer you none. You don't need to shrink so others can feel tall, and you are allowed to walk away from tables where respect is no longer being served. People often assume strength comes from confrontation, from yelling, demanding, fighting back loudly. But in my case, strength came from watching, planning, waiting, and then acting when the time was right. When Margaret said those words, "She's not your real mother," she didn't just insult me, she tried to erase me. She tried to remind me of a place she thought I belonged on the outside. But instead, she gave me exactly what I needed: clarity. That night I revealed my truth not just to shock them, but to free myself. To draw the line that said, this is who I am, and this is what I will no longer tolerate. And though the fallout was messy and painful, I would do it all again. Because I see the results now. My grandson knows what loyalty looks like. My husband rediscovered the value of partnership. And I finally stopped waiting for a family to accept me. I built my own. I think that's one of life's greatest truths. At some point, we all come to a crossroads. Do we keep chasing approval from people who will never offer it? Or do we begin honoring ourselves, even if that means being alone for a while? I chose the second path. And I was never truly alone, because I had myself, and I had Noah. Every Saturday, he visits with his backpack full of school projects and stories. We bake together, we tend the garden, and sometimes we just sit on the porch with lemonade and watch the birds. He calls me Mom. Not stepmom, not bonus mom, just Mom. Because in every way that matters, I am. No label can define love. No bloodline can outrank loyalty. I hope he carries that lesson into adulthood, that family isn't about who raised who. It's about who showed up, who stayed, who made you feel safe and seen. I don't know if Margaret will ever understand what she lost. Maybe she does, and maybe that's why she stays away. Pride can be a powerful prison, but I stopped waiting at the gate. And Daniel, he's still learning, still unlearning, but he's trying. And sometimes trying is enough if it comes with humility. We still talk about that night, sometimes quietly over coffee. He asks me if I ever regretted going public with the money, exposing the truth so openly. I always answer the same way: no, because I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for clarity. I wanted to know who I was dealing with. And now I do, but more importantly, I wanted to show Noah something, that standing up for yourself doesn't have to look like rage. It can look like a woman sitting calmly at a dinner table holding a glass of wine and calmly unveiling a truth no one saw coming. It can look like grace. It can look like power. It can look like a smile that says, I see everything now. So to every woman watching or listening to this, especially those who feel small, ignored, or underestimated, please hear me. You don't have to earn your place. You don't have to beg to be included. And you are absolutely allowed to rewrite your story at any age. You are not just a mother-in-law. You are not just a stepmom. You are not just anything. You are real. You are powerful. And if they can't see it, then maybe they never deserved a front row seat in your life to begin with. As for me, I'm happy now. Truly. Not because I have wealth, but because I reclaimed my worth. And in the quiet moments when Noah curls beside me and says, "You're my favorite person, I know I made the right choice." Because being loved for who you are, not what you provide, is the richest feeling in the world. This is my story, but I hope in some way it becomes part of yours too. And now I want to ask you, the listener, have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever hidden your strength just to keep the peace? What would you do if you were in my shoes? Comment below. I want to hear your story, because we're not alone. Not anymore. Let's keep building this space where real women with real voices tell stories that matter. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story. And until then, never forget, you were never the burden. You were the gift all along.